Mrs. Hughes! Mrs. Hughes! There is someone here to see you. Please, answer your doorbell. Mrs. Hughes!
The visitor continues to ring the buzzer. Getting no response, Thomas leaves his flat, hurries up the stairs, and bumps into a baby stroller.
Damn it to hell!
Thomas continues up the stairs and knocks on the door.
Mrs. Hughes, can't you hear the doorbell? There's somebody here to see you. Mrs. Hughes, I know you're in there. Please open the door. Mrs. Hughes, the doorbell's ringing for you. Can't you hear it? Mrs. Hughes!
Go away.
Mrs. Hughes, be reasonable. When the doorbell rings, you need to answer it.
Can't you see I'm very ill?
Now, how am I supposed to know that?
I'm telling you, I'm a very sick woman and I have a lot to do and I don't want to see anyone.
Well, I'm sorry you're not feeling well and that you have a lot to do. Well, we've all had days like that. But the least you could do is walk down and tell your visitors, whomever they are, that you are not up for company. Is that too much to ask?
Yes, it is when you're not feeling well and want to be alone.
There are others to consider.
Like who?
Like me, your downstairs neighbor.
How do my visitors and their doorbell ringing affect you?
Well, because I can hear it. I don't mind an occasional buzz, but when the buzzing goes on and on, it becomes an ingredient for a headache.
Maybe I'm not home.
No, nonsense, because I can hear you walking around up here. Don't you know how inconsiderate that is?
I'm sorry, but I have not been well, and when I'm not well, I don't want to see anyone.
You have been this way ever since you arrived here, that first day in December. As I was leaving the flat, you came running toward me and said, "Oh, wonderful, you have keys and can let me in." I didn't even know who you were. And then you told me that you were moving into the flat upstairs, the flat that was rightfully promised to me by the owner, but you and your husband tricked me out of getting it.
But I had to have this flat. One of my favorite authors, William B. Yeats, used to live here. Yes, here at 23 Fitzroy Road. Oh, there's a blue sign out in front of the house. Have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen it. At least twice a day since I moved in here.
Have you read his play, The Unicorn from the Stars?
Yes. But you're changing the subject again. What I want to know is why you locked yourself out.
Well, I didn't mean to. A gust of wind did blow the door shut with my keys inside. Well, don't you remember how cold it was outside? And you could see my children were crying in the car.
Well, where was your husband at? If you even have a husband.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, really? Mrs. Hughes, who are you fooling? I've only seen a man around here a handful of times since you've moved in.
Are you spying on me?
Spying? What gives you that impression? I was merely referring to your application. You said you were married.
We are.
Well, then where is he? I was promised the flat by the owner because I have two sons who come to stay with me occasionally.
Well, I have children too.
Yes, I've heard them wailing from downstairs.
You could have let me in.
Yes, I could have done a lot of things differently.
Instead, you told me to call the police.
Oh, I didn't tell you. I merely suggested. Oh, by the way, how did you get into the building?
Well, the police were no help. So I hurried to the gas board and convinced them my stove was being installed that day.
Well, why did you do that? They don't have keys to the building.
I know, but they do have the gas boys.
The what boys?
The gas boys.
That's what I thought you said. How were they able to let you in?
Well, they climbed along the back roof, pried open the window from one of the bedrooms upstairs, and unlocked the door.
Fascinating. The gas boys.
And then the Devon mover unloaded my belongings into the flat by candlelight because I had no power.
Oh, how romantic.
I had to go and complain to the electric board.
You certainly have your share of problems, Mrs.
Oh, that's only part of it.
Well, there's more.
Well, at the beginning of December, I was told, no, promised, that my telephone would be installed no later than the end of January. Now, it's the second week of February, and I still have to slosh my way down to the corner and use the coin box just to make a call.
Perhaps there are telephone boys you could call.
This isn't funny. There's no way for anyone to get a hold of me unless it's through the mail or through the kindness of friends who are lucky enough to have their own telephone.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I forget that there are challenges of moving into a new flat.
One can expect some delays in getting their utilities connected, but it has been over 10 weeks, and do you see a telephone?
No, but I haven't really looked. Oh my, I haven't seen anything like this since the London Blitz.
I have 2 small children that I'm caring for. If there was an emergency or something happened to them, or to me, or if I just needed to talk to somebody quickly, I can't do that right now. You do understand, don't you?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, please, come in. Any chair. Oh, here.
Are you sure I'm not imposing upon you? Besides, I didn't think you wanted any visitors tonight.
No, it's not that. My husband wants to meet tonight for some reason.
Mr. Hughes?
That's the one. And I haven't been able to get a babysitter.
Oh, don't look at me. Those days are over.
Oh, no, I wouldn't dream of asking you.
Good.
And besides, I don't even know you.
That's even better. While I'm here, there are a couple of items I want to discuss.
Oh, would you like something to drink?
Oh, no, that's not necessary. Well, what do you have?
Well, I'm having a brandy. I need some courage if I'm going to get through this evening alive. Would you like some?
Yes.
I used to enjoy having a glass of sherry, but this winter has made me a brandy drinker. Ooh, I believe I also might have some wine around here, if you would like some wine instead of brandy.
Brandy is fine.
There's also some milk in the refrigerator. I'm sure it's still good. Oh, and of course, there's water unless the pipes have frozen up again. Oh, good. They're still thawed out.
Brandy.
However, I don't know quite where it is. Oh, please forgive my appearance and the appearance of my flat. Oh, here it is. Things are chaotic during the day with the children and all, and it takes everything that I have to keep it together until they're asleep. I like order in my life.
Really?
Oh, here.
Thank you.
Haven't we had fantastic snows this year? This is my first winter in England that I've seen snow.
Oh, where are you from?
Oh, I'm from Massachusetts.
Where?
Oh, you know, the States.
Oh, really? I have been to the States twice.
So, you know that snow is usually part of the yearly landscape.
It depends on where one goes in the States.
Were you there for business or pleasure?
Both. Believe it or not, there was one time in my life I had a growing international reputation as a specialist in what was then called tribal art.
Really?
It helped me win a Rockefeller Foundation Museum Fellowship.
When was that?
In 1938-39, I first traveled to Buffalo, New York to install an African art exhibition.
How did you find Buffalo?
Cold.
It has that reputation.
Oh, and then I began my study of the state's galleries and museums, first visiting Texas, gushing with money but little taste. And then on to New Orleans, an oasis in a southern wasteland flooded with bourbon. And finally, then on to the New York World Fair.
What was the focus of your studies?
The latest innovations in American museum education and exhibits. Oh, did you go to the World Fair?
No, I was too young.
What a pity. It was quite wonderful. But beside the World Fair, there was one exhibit in the Museum of Modern Art, which is especially brilliant. A contemporary German art exhibition entitled Bauhaus, 1919 to 1928.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yes, I went back in 56, first as a visiting professor at Columbia University, after which I moved to upstate New York as a professor of art history at Buffalo University.
So, you know what winter is like in the Northeast?
Oh, yes, especially Buffalo.
Oh, well, when it started to snow at the end of December, I thought to myself, oh, good, we're going to have a Charles Dickens Christmas. But the snow hasn't stopped, and it has become a nightmare.
While we're on the subject of nightmares, there's a couple of items I wanted to ask you about.
Oh?
Yes, the first is the entranceway. You really must do a better job of keeping it clear.
Have you heard Devon was utterly cut off by 20-foot snowdrifts? Oh, they had to drop bread and milk by helicopter. Can you imagine?
Really? Now, the second, you need to purchase your own garbage bin and refrain from using mine.
Well, thank goodness I got out of there in time.
Depends on whom you talk to.
Well, I would have been buried forever under those snowdrifts with no way to dig my children and me out. The English, of course, have no snowplows because it only happens every 10 years or so, so they say.
But they do have bin wagons that pick the garbage up on a weekly basis from individual bins purchased and owned by the residents, so that they can clean up their building entrances.
And now the streets have become great mills of sludge, which freezes and melts and freezes like Manchester, New Hampshire. Have you ever been?
No, can't say that I have. Manchester, England was terrible enough.
Well, they say it's the coldest winter in London since 1813-14.
Despite rumors, I wasn't around then.
Well, besides the weather, there have been those electric strikes when all the lights and heaters go out for hours at a time.
Yes, I was there as well, but I'm still perplexed as to why the weather prevents you from cleaning up the entrance and buying your own garbage bin.
When the strikes happen, meals go uncooked, and I have to bundle my children to keep them warm. And of course, there are mad rushes for candles. Look, I don't have time to live up to your expectations.
Oh, they are not so much my expectations as they are your responsibilities.
Well, what do you do when the lights go out?
After you've lived through the devastation of 2 world wars, you learn to put everything in perspective and you deal with it.
January 9th was an unusually bad day.
Oh, was it? I don't recall. I was working.
The power failed and the frigid weather would not let up. I had to write a cover letter to an editor at the London magazine by candlelight. My fingers were icy cold because the flat had neither electricity nor heat. Well, at this point, the children and I had the flu. Oh, we were so sick that a friend of mine arranged for a live-in nurse who stayed at the flat for a week until I could recover enough to eat boiled eggs and chicken broth.
Is that the reason why you can't keep the entrance clean and you will not purchase a garbage bin?
Considering everything else, I didn't think it was necessary.
Well, it may not be necessary for you, but it is to me and to the other people on our block.
From the way you talk, you think I'm a public nuisance, don't you?
Well...
There are circumstances beyond my control.
Well, they don't excuse you from your responsibility.
I told you that I'm not well.
Are you seeing a doctor?
Yes, Dr. John Horder.
But he's a psychiatrist.
How do you know?
Well, because I've been seeing him as well. How often do you see him?
Well, every day.
Oh, really?
Have you heard of Home Help Service? You know, the government-sponsored agency.
No, I haven't. What do they do? Send over service boys to help you?
No, but they sent me a cleaning woman to straighten up the flat while I was recovering. Can you believe that?
No, I can't.
I must say they were a godsend.
No, a godsend would be service boys, young ones.
What I need above all is a good au pair girl. Do you have one?
No, my sons are older and what they need are their own bedroom.
I had to fire my au pair because she wasn't doing her job.
Why was that?
Well, the children were being left alone for hours. You can't do that to young children. Who knows what would have happened?
Oh, perhaps they will grow up to be independent and self-sufficient.
Are you sure you don't know of a competent, reliable au pair looking for employment?
I have already told you that I don't.
Well, you don't need to be rude about it.
Excuse me?
With the winter being so unbearable, all I've needed was some encouragement. Someone to tell me that I was doing fine. Is that asking too much?
No. Maybe they have a government service for that.
All I get from well-meaning friends and family is, I told you so, or you should do this. I have been shit upon long enough in my life.
Well, maybe you should... there you have it. You almost have me doing it.
Throughout January and now February, I have fought the flu, frostbite, and depression. I have to continue to take my tonic to help me eat, but now I need sleeping pills at night and antidepressants during the day.
Whatever happened to the daily vitamin?
Did you know that the hardest depression to endure is the one in the early morning?
No, I didn't. I'm usually asleep during that time.
Well, that's when the children are asleep and I have to get up and write. Usually it's at 4 in the morning.
Yes, I know. I usually hear you stumbling about.
It is quiet then.
No, for you it is. I have your stumbling to deal with.
Even though my depression is at its worst during those hours, I still have to endure and write.
You don't say. What do you write?
Poetry.
Oh, really? It's nice that you have a hobby.
It's not a hobby. It's my livelihood. I'm a poet and a novelist.
Oh, well, excuse me.
For your information, I have been writing poems from the time I was quite small. By the age of 5, I was finishing whole poems. Short, but crafted.
You don't say.
My mother was devoted to me and my brother Warren. Well, sometimes overly devoted. She had us on a very ambitious program of reading books aloud to us, beginning with nursery rhymes, fairy tales, and poems from Sun Under the Silver Umbrella. Have you heard of the book?
No, can't say that I have.
Oh, it's delightful. From there, my mother progressed to A.A. Milne, J.R.R. Tolkien, Robert Louis Stevenson, Dr. Seuss, and Kipling's Just So Stories.
No Dickens and Tolstoy? I'm surprised.
Thinking back, my favorite was Lamb's Tale from Shakespeare. What was yours?
I don't recall. We were already working in the mines.
When I was 8.5 years old, my first poem was published.
At 8.5, well, aren't we precocious?
It came out in the Boston Traveler, and from then on, I suppose I've been a bit of a professional. Did you have any unique talents when you were younger?
Besides working in the mines?
Yes.
Well, my parents thought I showed a talent for singing as a boy.
Oh?
Yes, and in fact, I won prizes at several festivals.
Do you still sing?
Yes. What are your poems about?
Oh, my first poems were about nature, like the coming of spring, the stars overhead, and the first snowfall. I think birds, bees, spring, fall, and all those subjects, which are perfect gifts to the person who doesn't have any interior experience to write about.
They're lovely, aren't they?
Well, in the fall of 1940, it all changed because of my father.
Yeah, fathers are always the first to be blamed.
You see, my father, Aimee Plath, he emigrated to the States from Gabrow, Germany as a teenager, and he traveled over to New York City and then to Washington, where he got a degree from the university.
Oh.
And if it wasn't enough, he earned another master's degree and a doctorate from Harvard.
What in?
Biology. In fact, he taught biology at Boston University with a focus in apiology.
In what?
Oh, you know, the study of bees.
Oh, how busy.
Well, he also taught German, and that's where he met my mother, Aurelia Schober.
I see.
She was a master's degree student at Boston University, and he was her professor.
How romantic.
It was. And after a very brief courtship, they married in January 1932, and I was born 9 months later.
What a finale.
And my mother had to resign from her teaching job. And my father wanted her to become a full-time housewife and a mother.
Is that what she wanted for herself?
No. But my mother realized if she wanted a peaceful home, and she did, she would simply have to become more submissive, even though it was not in her nature to be so.
The art of submission. First, you lose your identity, and then you lose your mind.
Well, my mother was also a first-generation American. Her parents had emigrated from Austria, and they spoke nothing to her but German during her childhood.
At least they were speaking to each other.
During the First World War, she remembered being verbally and physically assaulted for being German by the students at her school in Winthrop.
Where's Winthrop?
North of Boston.
I see.
My mother loved English literature, the Brontes and Jane Austen, and her favorite writer was not a novelist but a poet, Emily Dickinson. She so much wanted to be a writer, but her father disapproved, and so she pursued another career and became a teacher.
And then she wasn't allowed to teach.
Yes.
You mentioned something happened involving you and your father. What happened?
When I was 8 years old, my father died suddenly as a result of complications from diabetes.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He refused to take care of himself and wouldn't see a doctor until it was too late.
Oh, but surely you have fond memories of him, don't you?
My father was very strict and demanded perfection. And we were always so afraid of him.
Oh, I'm sure he wanted the best for you and your family.
I don't know if he did or not. What I do know is that his authoritarian attitudes and early death drastically defined who I am, and has also affected my relationships with men, as well as my writing.
Well, I really should be going. Besides, you have a date with your husband, for which you have to get ready.
When I was told of his death, I announced to my mother and the world that I would never speak to God again. And I never have. His death has haunted me for all of my life.
Besides the entranceway and the trash bin, there was another matter that I wanted to talk to you about.
For many years, I believed that my mother killed my father.
Oh, I'm sure she would not have done that.
You don't know my mother.
There have been others. What about Mr. Hughes? I'm sure he loves you.
I remember my mother coming in one morning with tears of nobility in her eyes to tell me that he was gone for good. I hated her for that. And I hate her because I believe that he wasn't loved by her.
Well, you don't really think that, do you?
Yes. I know he was an ogre, but he was still my father, and I miss him. And I always will. Yes, he was old when she married him, too old to be my father, to be anyone's father.
Well, age isn't everything. I've known many autumn and spring relationships that have worked just fine.
For many years, I was convinced it was her fault.
It does take two to tango.
Maybe, if the truth is told, the reason why I don't trust men is because they don't stay around and love me like a father.
Oh, I'm sure Mr. Hughes loves you.
Does he?
Well, I believe it is time for me to go.
Oh, please don't. Do you want some more brandy?
No, I really should be going.
Oh, please, just a few more minutes.
All right. Well, I'll have some more brandy if you're still offering.
But enough about my family. What's important now is my children and my writing.
Where are your children?
Oh, my children? Oh, they're upstairs asleep.
That reminds me of the other item I wanted to talk to you about.
What's that?
It involves your perambulator.
My what?
Your perambulator.
You mean my baby stroller?
Well, yes.
Well, what about it?
I would appreciate it if you wouldn't block the building's main doorway from the street with it.
But haven't you been listening to what I've been trying to explain to you is that I have had other problems to deal with?
Yes, you've already told me.
Well, I'm trying my best.
Yes, but trying isn't good enough at times.
I can only write when they're asleep.
You've mentioned.
I'm getting up at 4 already.
I know. And all I'm asking is that you...
You see, I'm a writer, and a writer has to write.
Okay, what could you possibly write in this flat?
Here. This is where I write.
A kitchen table.
Yes, it serves as my writing table, which you can see is piled with tediously neat stacks of books and paper, all laid prim and four square to the table's corners.
Yes. I see your ragged brown thesaurus. And, well, what is this? A cookbook?
I read recipes when I get overwhelmed.
No, you don't.
Did you know that I'm a faithful devotee of the joy of cooking? It's my culinary lifeline to the Americas while I live in London. The blessed Rombauer, I read through the vegetable section, mouth-watering, to cull all the sautéed dishes. We have chiefly potatoes, eggs, tomatoes, and onions. But, oh, how I love to cook. The delectable recipes in the book with all the right touches of seasoning and always the one ingredient, which I don't have. Makes me long for a time when I can cook with a modern stove, refrigerator, and a variety of food.
Well, that's good.
Just before the holidays, I made a handsome fruitcake. Do you like fruitcake?
Well, maybe a piece or two on Christmas Day, with plenty of brandy.
I know it's an acquired taste. Oh, but you should have seen my fruitcake.
I've seen plenty of fruitcakes in my life.
No, but mine is different. With green and red and brown fruit, studied the bottom of the yellow slab sides, and when it rose to a browned crown. And when you sliced into the cake and held a piece up to light, it looked like a stained glass window. You would swear you were at St. Peter's, and oh, the taste was sinfully good.
I don't think I've ever heard of St. Peter's Cathedral being referred to as a slice of fruit cake. But knowing some of the people who attend there, well, perhaps.
But I get worried about becoming too happily, stodgily practical. Instead of writing, I go make an apple pie or study the joy of cooking, reading it as if it were a rare novel. And then I say to myself, whoa! At one time, I was afraid I would escape into domesticity and stifle myself by falling headfirst into a bowl of cookie batter.
A monument to the incredible gullibility of the human race.
And then I pick up the blessed diary of Virginia Woolf.
Oof.
one long wail of self-pity.
Oh, she works off her depression over rejections from Harper's, no less, by cleaning out the kitchen and cooking haddock and sausage.
She really was a very good writer, and I'm awfully fond of her, but oh dear, she was a problem girl.
Bless her. I feel my life is linked to her somehow.
You don't say.
I love her from reading Mrs. Dalloway. Even with her suicide, I felt I was reduplicating in the Black Summer of 1953, only I couldn't drown.
Well, perhaps bring some more stones with you next time. But seriously, you're not suicidal, are you?
Well, I suppose I'll always be vulnerable, slightly paranoid.
Oh, but you have two children, two lovely, healthy, vocal children who are your responsibility, right?
Yes, and my children are usually healthy and resilient and apple pie happy, and I support them by being a writer.
Yes, of course.
I used to believe that I would love a life of balancing children, sonnets, and dirty dishes.
You don't anymore.
Loving to do something as opposed to having to do it are two different things. I have to get up and write at 4 a.m. before my 2 tiny children awake and send me into a daily spin of dirty dishes and laundry. I really must do something about that mess. Don't you love that word?
Mess?
Oh, it's so simple and concise.
Yes, but it very much says it all.
I do wish that there were other words one could use to describe my kitchen.
No other words that could do it justice.
I must say that I have been able to transform these challenges of my life into art. For instance, I made lamb for my children the day before I wrote the poem Mary's Song. Oh, do you want to hear it?
No.
It goes something like, precipice that emptied one man into space. The ovens glowed like heavens, incandescent. It is a heart, this holocaust I walk in. Oh, golden child, the world will kill and eat. Makes you want to have a second helping of lamb, doesn't it?
No, not really.
Oh, and I made custard and banana bread on the day I wrote the poem Medusa. Some will say the poem is a scathing indictment of my relationship with my mother. I don't think it is. Maybe an honest appraisal. Oh, let me read a verse or two from the poem and let you decide.
No. You don't have to, really. I believe you.
Well, do you like lemon pudding cake? I do too. I made some the other day while I was composing the poem Lady Lazarus. Well, I think I still have some lemon pudding cake. Or would you like to have a slice of my tomato soup cake? It's one of my specialties.
Tomato soup cake? Oh, you would?
Yes. I made this recently on the day I wrote the poem Death and Company. Would you like a slice? My children won't touch it.
Perhaps they know best.
Are you sure?
No, thank you. I couldn't possibly eat that.
Well, I got the recipe from Ladies' Home Journal magazine.
No, you don't say. It's incredible what bored American housewives will do.
When I settled permanently in England, I begged my mother for a subscription to Ladies' Home Journal, not just because it and the New Yorker were the 2 magazines I most wanted to be published in, but also for the journal's American recipes that I was homesick for. You know what that's like, don't you?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been homesick. You will grow out of it.
Do you really think so?
Yes, give yourself some time.
But I must say that cooking American recipes does help lessen the pain. During my pregnancies with my 2 children, I prepared for their home births by baking in volume. Sand tarts, Toll House cookies, apple pies, and stocking them in my American-style icebox. When my son was born in 1962, I made my family recipe carrot cake as a gift to my midwife.
I love carrot cake.
Oh, I don't have any right now. Oh, but I do have tomato soup cake.
Yes, you've told me already. Oh, all right. I'll try it.
Oh, good. It's really easy to make.
What's in it besides tomato soup?
Well, it involves cake flour sifted with baking powder and soda.
That's an excellent first step.
Oh, and then you add your ground cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg.
You can't go wrong with those spices. That's not bad.
So you like it?
Oh, yes. There are also raisins.
I used a cup of seedless raisins. Oh, and of course, butter, sugar, 2 large eggs. Make sure they're large.
Of course, I wouldn't have it any other way.
And 1 can of condensed tomato soup. Make sure you get the American kind. They're usually 11 fluid ounces. I find that the British use a small quantity in their cans.
Well, perhaps we're still rationing because of the last war.
Oh, I'd also throw in a half cup of chopped walnuts. It gives texture to the cake.
Ah, yes, it's good to have a little roughage in your diet. What is this frosting?
Cream cheese.
Have them.
Well, if you can, use the Philadelphia cream cheese.
Excuse me. But don't you have a date to get ready for?
A date?
Yes, with your husband. It's getting late, and I thought that...
You may have heard of my first book, The Colossus and Other Poems.
No, I can't say that I have.
You haven't?
I'm sorry.
Well, I worked on it for many years. After months of delays, Knopf, the publisher, finally released it last May 14th to be exact. Heinemann had brought out the book in England, and if nothing else, it was reviewed by the major periodicals. More than I can say about Knopf. Even if it took over 6 months for some of the notices to appear, and once they did, they were not so unqualified as I would have hoped. I worked hard on this book for many years. It was a part of me.
It is disappointing.
Well, disappointing, to say the least. Throughout last summer and fall, I wondered if I had wasted all of my life with no prospects of receiving fame or money for this book.
There's more to life than fame and fortune.
I know, but it has been so devastating to me to realize that my poems may go unnoticed because of the lack of reviews or the publishers not bothering to advertise.
Well, it does make a lovely gift book.
Oh, would you like to have a copy?
Oh, no, I couldn't.
Oh, I have a box filled with them in the other room. I'll even sign one for you.
Only if you have one handy.
I have lots of them. You know, I always wondered what to do with the hate for my mother.
Why don't you bake a cake for her?
What?
Yeah, no, I was just being, have you ever thought about writing down the feelings you have toward her?
I don't believe it.
What?
That's what I did. I wrote a novel about her.
Oh, a novel? Oh, dear, you certainly do have feelings about her, don't you?
Well, I began to write the novel in 1961 and finished it last fall after he moved out.
Mr. Hughes?
But when I was asked about it, I told my mother I'd thrown together events from my own life, fictionalizing to add color. Oh, it's a pot boiler, really. But I think it will show how isolated a person feels when she is suffering a nervous breakdown.
So, you had a breakdown as well?
Yes.
Oh. Do you have any more brandy? I think I'll be needing some.
Oh, yes. I tried to picture my world and the people in it as seen through the distorting lens of a pill jar.
Thank you. A bell jar, you say?
Yes, and what's more, I think I'll be a pretty good novelist.
You don't say.
Oh, yes, if my stuff makes me laugh, and if I can laugh now, it must be hellishly funny stuff.
Well, it may be funny to you, but to others, it may be something else.
The novel was written as part of the Saxton Fellowship. It's a program affiliated with the New York publisher Harper & Row.
What was their response? Did they like it?
Their immediate response to my manuscript was not good. They withdrew their support, calling it disappointing, juvenile, and overwrought.
So I guess they didn't like it.
However, it did free me up to offer it to publishers in London. Heinemann grabbed and published it last month.
You don't say. Well, congratulations. A book of poetry and a novel. You should feel very proud of yourself, Mrs. Hughes.
Well, Knopf also rejected my novel. Well, let me see if I can find what they wrote to me.
But it doesn't matter. Your novel is published.
Oh, here it is. Because they could not warm up to it, despite my obvious way with words, to say nothing of the sharp eye for unusual and vivid detail, they said that I needed to get the novel out of my system so that I could move forward and deal with the book's subject matter in a novelistic way. They thought the story read as if it was autobiographical, almost frantically so.
How perceptive.
Well, not would rather that I withhold the book from the American market altogether. Can you believe that?
Nothing surprises me anymore. Now, I really should be going.
Well, Judas Jones, Knopf's editor, personally wrote a lovely note explaining their rejection.
That was considerate of her.
Miss Jones admired my work, but she had hoped that I would put my talents to use on a novel more accessible to readers, noting that the poetry market is as small as it is.
There's a reason for their madness in the publishing world.
And what is that?
Simple. They want to make a profit.
Well, there's more to life than making money. Well, there's making art. Oh, here it is.
You're right. This appears to be a lovely rejection letter.
She said that I neither managed to use my material successfully in a novelistic way, nor succeeded in establishing a point of view.
Well, since I haven't read your book, I really don't know what to say.
She couldn't accept the extent of the narrator's illness and suicide attempt.
Well, perhaps mental illness and suicides just aren't her cup of tea.
Well, she said the bell jar never really hooked her.
The Bell Jar. Is that the name of your book?
What was she expecting? Another Little Women?
Oh, who knows? Oh, dear. Don't you need to get ready for a date with your husband?
Yes, but I can't go.
Why not?
Well, for one, I don't have anyone to stay here with my children.
They're in their beds, aren't they?
Yes, but I can't leave them alone.
How long do you think you will be gone?
Oh, an hour or so. Why?
Well, I could stay here and keep an eye on them if you want me to. There shouldn't be any problems. They're asleep. And besides, I do have experience with children. I do have two of my own.
But I hardly know you.
That's probably a good thing. I insist. You'd better get ready. You can't show up looking like this. You don't want to scare your husband off, do you?
No.
Oh, don't just stand there as if you were in a daze. Go! We must make you more presentable.
But...
No buts. Now, don't you have anything else to wear besides this bathrobe?
I have a couple of new dresses. Oh, Miss Prouty gave me some money to buy myself some new clothes for Christmas.
I don't have the slightest idea who Miss Prouty is.
Oh, she's...
And frankly, we don't have the time to find out. Just go get the dresses. Oh, and you can't wear those house slippers out.
Oh, but...
I know they're warm and comfortable, but they're a visual insult. You have another pair of shoes to wear, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Bring them down with you. So I gather these are your book reviews.
What?
Oh, never mind. There are certain criticisms of America that the neurotic can make as well as anyone, perhaps better. And Miss Lucas makes them brilliantly. Victoria Lucas. Miss Lucas can certainly write. The Bell Jar is the first feminine novel in a Salinger mood. Now, hold them up. Oh, no. Not unless you're a novitiate ready to take your solemn vows. You didn't buy this dress, did you?
No, my mother did.
No wonder you have issues with her. Now, let me see what the other one looks like.
What about this?
Yes, that's more like it. Now, put it on. I read some of your book reviews. They were relatively good. You should feel good about them.
Well...
let me help you with the back.
You're so kind to do this for me. How can I repay you?
Oh, forget it. Just try to keep the building's entrance clean and buy your own garbage bin.
I'll try to remember.
And that's all I ask. Now, let me see. Much better. Now, you do have some nylons, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Where are they?
Well, they're upstairs.
Don't just stand there. Go get them.
Yes.
You can't go in public without wearing stockings. It's not appropriate. The war's been over for years. Oh, and bring down some cosmetics. You'll want to look inviting instead of chronically depressed.
Oh, I found a good pair.
Good. Now put them on. Oh, dear. You look like you've been crying all day.
I have.
Well, you can't let him see you like that. You'll scare him away.
But what do you know about women's cosmetics?
Plenty. And besides, I was an art curator for many years, and I know what looks good and what doesn't. However, I'm not a miracle worker, but let me see what I can do. I was glancing at your novel. Who is this Victoria Lucas?
She's my pseudonym.
A pseudonym? Why?
Well, so that I wouldn't embarrass my family and friends in the States, mostly my mother.
Well, that must be some potboiler you have, Mrs. Hughes.
Heinemann, the publisher, had submitted the novel to Harper's and Row after Knopf turned it down. They also rejected it.
Did they give any reason why?
Harper's belief that following Esther's breakdown, the story ceases to be a novel and becomes a case of history.
Who's Esther?
Esther's the main character of my novel. She's the one that has a nervous breakdown and then tries to commit suicide.
Sounds like a cheerful person that you very much want to be around.
You see, society allows a man to write about going mad. Salinger and Ken Casey have done it. But when a woman dares to approach the subject, she is belittled and publicly scorned. Where is the fairness in that?
Oh, please sit still and don't get yourself overly excited. I'm trying my best to make you look attractive and inviting so that you're not belittled and scorned by your husband.
You don't understand. My novel is autobiographical.
No, dear. I suspected that. So you're Esther?
Yes.
But why?
I had to. I had to write the book to free myself of the past. I needed to write it to move on.
Yes. You do what you have to do.
And despite the rejections and chilly reception from the bell jar and for my poems, I again returned to fiction writing.
Of course.
Well, I've completed a large portion of a second novel, which was the sequel to the bell jar.
No, you don't say.
It was a joyous book dealing with the experiences of a young American girl in England.
Another autobiographical novel?
Yes. How did you know?
Well, I had a hunch it was about you.
Oh, well, it told of her romance, her return to the States with her husband, and when she taught and traveled with him, and ended with the birth of her first child. The hero of the book was her husband.
How convenient. Did Mr. Hughes read it?
No, I was going to give the rough form of it to him as a birthday gift in August. It was then that I discovered he was having an affair with another woman.
Oh, dear, did you know her?
Yes. And her name is Asia, and her husband, David, is also a poet.
All in the family.
Well, the Weevils used to be friends of ours. I rented our flat in London to them, and I even invited them up to Court Green in Devon for a weekend last spring.
A weekend in the country. Perhaps too much hospitality.
And then she repaid my kindness and friendship by throwing herself at him in the kitchen of all places.
Gives a new meaning to the book Joy of Cooking.
I picked up on obvious clues, from prolonged glances, subtle body gestures, suggestive insinuations. She was a pro. Nevertheless, I did nothing and pretended it wasn't happening.
Being in denial is very addicting.
There were others, anonymous girls from Smith and Cambridge.
He was certainly prolific, wasn't he?
Yes, and she had a reputation of having numerous affairs, especially with poets. Her marriage to Weevil had evolved from an affair that they were having while she was still married to another man.
Couplets were her favorite stanzas.
When a marriage that is supposed to be perfect, made in heaven as I once called it, begins to break up, the disintegration becomes magnified many times over.
But your marriage may not be over. Perhaps when he sees how radiant you look tonight.
You don't understand. When you give someone your whole heart and he doesn't want it, you can't take it back. It's gone forever.
You're not the only one that this has happened to. I know it's hard to believe, but I've been there before, many times. Now, stand up, put your shoes on, and let me see how you look. Well, not bad. Not bad at all.
You really think so?
Yes, you look smashing. Do you have a mirror down here so that you can see my artwork?
I have a mirror on the bathroom wall.
Well, let's go see. What do you think?
It looks like someone tried to cover up their chronic depression with a layer of Revlon.
I have to admit that I'm no cosmetologist, but it's not that bad.
No, you did an admirable Pygmalion job. I can't have him see me like this.
Oh, but you must not give up. You cannot. You still love him, don't you?
Yes, I guess.
No. Well, then don't just stand there. Go get him. No, where's your coat?
It's in the closet.
Go get it. Hurry. You have just enough time to get there.
What about the children?
I will stay here with them until you get back. It will give me time to read your book.
Oh, I wish I had the draft of my Bell Jar sequel for you to read. But when he left the children and me last fall, I destroyed all of the drafts in a little bonfire in the backyard, along with everything else that reminded me of him and our life together.
Tad bit drastic, wasn't it?
Yes, I suppose. But it was something that had to be done. You know, a funeral pyre.
Well, I suppose if you suppose.
Well, since then, I've been pouring all my creative energy into another collection of poems and my newest novel, Double Take. I've debated with myself to change the title to Double Exposure.
What's the novel about?
A young woman who discovers that her perfect paragon of a husband is an adulterer. Which title do you like best?
I don't know. Let me read the draft first. Now, you'd better hurry.
Thank you for being here and for being my friend.
What are neighbors for?
If you get hungry, there's some more tomato soup cake in the kitchen.
Thank you, but I will stick with the brandy. Good luck. What in the... Who is it?
It's Sylvia.
Who?
Sylvia, Mrs. Hughes from upstairs.
Oh, yes. What is it?
Sorry to be bothering you, but would you be able to let me have some airmail postal stamps, please?
Airmail postal stamps at this time of night?
Yes, I have some letters that need to be mailed before morning. Letters to America.
I don't bloody care where they're going. Don't you know what time it is?
No, I have to mail these letters.
It is nearly midnight.
Is it? Oh, I'm sorry, but you see, I have to mail these letters before morning.
What is happening in the morning that is so urgent?
Do you have airmail postal stamps or not?
Well, I suppose I do. How many do you need?
4 will do.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. How much do I owe you?
Nothing.
Oh, I must pay you, or I won't be right with my conscience before God, will I?
I really don't think God cares at this time of night. Now, off to bed with you.
There's too much to do.
It can wait until tomorrow morning.
But it can't.
It can't. Of course it can.
No, it's got to be done tonight.
Are you feeling all right?
Yes, of course.
Should I call your doctor?
No, don't. I'm all right.
Well, if you say so. Is there anything else you need? Anything that I can help you with at all?
Yes, there is. I was wondering, what time do you leave for work?
The usual time.
What is that?
7:30, 7:35, depending upon how long it requires me to look presentable, which is taking me longer every year. Why do you ask?
Just wondering.
I see. Well, good night.
Good night, and thank you for the postal stamps.
Thomas closes the door, turns off the light, and starts back to his bedroom. He stops midway to listen to whether or not Plath has gone up the stairs. After several moments, he notices the hall light's still on and returns quickly, unlocks, and opens his door.
What are you? I'm calling your doctor.
Oh, no, please don't do that. I just had a marvelous dream, a most beautiful vision.
You are not well.
Oh, please don't call him.
Well, then, you can't stand out here dreaming in the hall. It's bloody freezing out here. You'll catch a death of cold.
I'm fine, really.
No. Let me take you back to your flat. Come on now.
Thomas closes his flat door and starts to help her up the stairs. He bumps again into the baby carriage.
Damn it! Something must be done about your baby carriage, Mrs. Hughes.
But it's so convenient there.
I know, for you, but you promised me last night you would park it someplace else.
I know, and I will.
Now, here, a few more steps. Here we are.
Thomas opens Plath's front door and helps her inside.
Are you sure you're feeling all right?
Yes, I'm fine. Really, I am. I was just having a beautiful vision.
Yes. Of course you were. Now, what drugs have you taken this evening?
What do you mean? Just the medication that Dr. Porter has prescribed. Just some antidepressants and sleeping pills.
No wonder you are acting in this manner. You've cleaned your flat. Your mother must be coming over for a visit.
No, I just tidied it up a little.
Cleaning would have taken much longer, and I don't have the time.
What do you mean you don't have the time? You keep saying that. Of course you do. You're young and you have all the time in the world.
But I don't. Thank you for the postal stamps and for escorting me up this flat.
My pleasure. Anytime. By the way, you haven't said how your date with Mr. Hughes was last night.
There's nothing to say.
All dressed and looking glamorous. Surely he must have fallen in love with you again.
No.
No what?
Did you have any problems with the children?
They were perfect, except for the one instance. I thought I had already mentioned it to you.
Oh, no, you may have. I don't remember.
No, it was really nothing. Your daughter, Frida, cried out once, as if she were having a nightmare.
She's been having nightmares lately. When I try to comfort and reassure her that everything is okay, she always asks me, "Daddy come soon?"
What do you tell her?
I didn't know what to tell her before last night because I was hoping he would come back, but that's all changed.
So I gather things didn't go quite so well with Mr. Hughes last night.
I can't lie to her anymore. He's not coming back.
Oh, dear.
What am I going to tell them? She will only be 3 in May, and Nicholas has just turned 1 on January 17th.
I don't know what to say.
They are the reasons why I hang on.
As they should be.
You don't want anything?
No, thank you. I won't be able to sleep as it is.
Oh, you too?
Mm.
It's been so long since I've been able to sleep without medication. Even with the drugs, I wake up after 2 hours of intense nightmares with horrible anxiety and fear.
I know. I can hear you downstairs, walking back and forth.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Don't worry about it.
They are my children. My mother has volunteered to take Frida, but I told her no.
Well, that was awfully nice of her to offer.
Was it?
I'm sure she meant well.
Always the best intentions, but she has no idea what emotional upset my children have been through, and losing their father and having to move.
Well, surely she would have some understanding of what you are going through.
You would think. But mothers forget. I am my children's one and only security. To uproot them would be thoughtless and cruel. I will not put them through any more if I can help it. I am their mother.
What about Mr. Hughes? Doesn't he bear some responsibility here?
You would think. The few times that he came to visit the children, he wouldn't have anything to do with Nick.
What do you mean?
Well, he wouldn't pick him up or hold him.
Really?
Yes, but with Frida, it's different. In fact, she cries whenever he leaves her.
And you allow this to happen?
I can't keep him away as long as he visits our children, or at least one of them, and continues to make his monthly maintenance payment. I don't care.
I've noticed that he doesn't come around here often anymore.
Not as often as he did in the beginning. In fact, last night was the first time I've seen him in a couple of weeks.
You mentioned last night you thought you were still in love with him.
I thought I was.
What happened last night?
Did you know that I find myself standing the living room window for hours at a time, looking down toward the corner, waiting for him? And then he would suddenly appear from the nearby tube station. You should see him. Each time he wears all black. He usually wears a black scarf thrown dramatically around his neck.
All pomp and no circumstance.
Something like that.
You haven't answered my question.
Maybe there was a time I thought I was still in love with him, but not anymore. No, I'm just angry and guilty over his upsetting my children's young lives. They didn't do anything.
Keep reminding yourself that you weren't the one to walk out on them.
Could we talk about something else? Is that all right with you?
Certainly. Sorry for being a nosy neighbor. I was just concerned.
I appreciate it.
No, it's late. And I should be going. I have to work tomorrow.
Oh, please stay.
All right. Just a little bit longer.
You probably don't want to hear anything about my personal problems and daily challenges, right?
Well, you've already given me an earful, but I don't mind. Whatever is troubling you.
I have so much to do and so little time left.
I don't understand. Are you going somewhere?
Well, what about you? You know so much about me, and I know so little about you.
There's nothing really significant for you to know. Since last evening, I've had a chance to read through most of your poems and your novel.
Oh, what did you think?
I had no idea how talented you are.
Nobody does, except for a few people.
And me, though I do have many questions.
About my writing? What do you want to know?
Seems as though you are attracted to darkness.
Darkness? No. There are many themes, subjects, things that I'm attracted to, but I want my writing to deal with matters closer to the bone. And so instead of writing about things like goblins, the Lorelei, and fairy tale characters, I'm confronting weighty issues like myself and the periods of depression and mental breakdowns that I have endured.
Endured?
No, enduring.
I see.
Isn't it shocking that a woman like me can also have feelings and emotions that I need help with?
Not particularly. It happens to all of us. No one is excluded. Remember, I live in the flat below you, and I can hear your cries for help. Oh, it is a discouraging world at times, and I wish there was something I could do to say that would make things better for you, to assure you that you are not alone, that others like me have gone through similar situations, and that things will be better in the morning.
If there is another morning.
Of course there will be. Why do you say that?
Did you know that I have been and currently am in therapy?
Well, yes, you've mentioned that you're seeing Dr. Horder. For how long have you been in therapy?
Since the summer of 1953.
Really?
I was returning from New York City, where I had just finished a month-long internship at Mademoiselle magazine. My family met me at the station. Mother remarked that I looked tired and unsmiley, but you know how mothers are.
Yes, I do. I had one too, you know.
On the way home, she broke the news that I had not been accepted at Harvard for a summer school course. Me. Can you believe it?
Well, I don't.
Me, the top student at Smith College.
Well, did you ever find out why?
Mother said something about having the class being filled, but I didn't believe her. And then it started.
What started? What started?
Well, I felt trapped by stifling negativity, and it was threatening to consume me. The darkness came over me, and I realized that I was sick. I had to keep telling myself that I had to stop thinking about harming myself with razor blades, even though the possibility of ending it all was reassuring. By mid-July, my insomnia was so severe that I was managing to get only 2 hours of sleep a night. I was plagued by thoughts of ending up in a straitjacket, locked away in some mental hospital, and felt so full of murderous rage that I even considered killing my mother while she slept.
Did you ever talk to anyone about this? Your mother, perhaps?
No, but she did notice that I had a couple of partially healed scars on my legs. I told her that I gashed myself to see if I had the guts to end the pain, and then I took hold of my mother's hand and told her that I wanted to die.
Cheery. How did your mother respond to that?
To say the least, this made Mother somewhat nervous, and she took me in her arms and tried to reassure me that I was simply exhausted and that I had everything to live for.
I hate to tell you this, but she was probably right. You were exhausted, and you still have everything to live for. You know, your children, your writing.
Really?
What did your mother do?
Well, following the advice from our family doctor, she took me to a psychiatrist, Dr. Tillotson. He was young and handsome. I didn't like him because he reminded me of an ex-boyfriend, and I didn't feel safe around him.
Safe? What do you mean? What did he do to you?
He left me.
What?
Well, as he was leaving for vacation, he prescribed sleeping pills for me and suggested that I find a job because that would take my mind off my troubles. Can you believe that he or anyone would get paid for saying things like that?
Yes, I would, unfortunately. What did you do?
Well, I couldn't find a job, so I volunteered at a hospital as a candy striper.
Helping others. What a fabulous idea.
No, it was a disaster. I didn't last for a week. As for the sleeping pills, I became even more depressed. When he came back from vacation, Dr. Tillotson prescribed electroconvulsive therapy, where they put 2 electrodes on both sides of your head and then they zap you, causing you to have seizures, which are supposed to provide you with relief from your depression.
You mean shock therapy, don't you?
As they are commonly called. Sounds fun, huh?
Not particularly.
Well, the first treatment was at the end of July. I was hesitant about doing the treatments, and he assured me that everything was going to be all right. Mother also was reluctant at first, and she thought he was too young and inexperienced.
And your mother's intuition was probably right.
But she eventually gave in. Our neighbor drove us to the treatments where they were given on an outpatient basis. Metal probes were placed on my temples so that potent dosages of electricity could be shot through my body. There was no muscle relaxant or general anesthetic given to me. Nothing. I remembered my body was rigid with fear, and as a result, I was nearly electrocuted.
Dear.
It's been documented in my book, The Bell Jar, and in my poetry.
Yes, I do remember reading about it last night.
Here. It's all here. Should I read it to you?
No, it's not necessary.
No, let me find it.
I've already read it.
Oh, here it is. I shut my eyes, and there was a brief silence, like an indrawn breath. And then something bent down and took hold of me and shook me like the end of the world. Whee! It shrilled through an air crackling with blue light, and with each flash a great jolt drugged me till I thought my bones would break. I wondered what terrible thing I had done and why I was being punished.
You hadn't done anything.
Then why were they punishing me?
They were only trying to help you.
No, I refuse to believe that. Was I too ambitious? Had I set my sights too high? Was it because I'm a woman and a writer?
No, I don't believe there was any maliciousness in their intent.
Really? So how come there was no one in the recovery room for me? No one.
Good question. I don't know.
I'd laid there alone with painful, numbing loneliness. I'd never felt so abandoned in my life. Against my wishes, I had to undergo 3 more treatments. The treatments were supposed to help me. They were supposed to lower my anxiety by creating temporary memory loss. But they didn't work.
Well, everybody is different. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for another.
You don't understand. The treatments increased my anxiety, which turned my sleeplessness into acute insomnia. By the end of the procedures, I was sleep deprived for a month. Mother became worried and started to lock my sleeping pills under lock and key in the safe, a metal lockbox that she kept in the bedroom she shared with me. It was then when I started to plot my suicide. I didn't know how or when. All I knew is that it had to be done. One morning when Mother was away, I found her key and stole a bottle of 50-some-odd sleeping pills from her safe. And then I hid in the crawl space under the front porch of our home and swallowed as many of them as I could. I blissfully succumbed to the whirling blackness that I honestly believed was eternal oblivion, but it didn't work. I'd stupidly taken too many pills and vomited most of them up. I came to consciousness in a dark hell after several days. It was my brother who finally heard my weak cry for help, and he rescued me.
Oh, thank God.
What?
Well, that your brother heard your cries and rescued you.
Why did he?
Well, because he was concerned.
For what?
For you, and that was his way of showing that he loved you.
But if he really loved me, why couldn't he have just left me alone?
Well, I don't know why. Well, perhaps because he thought your life was worth saving.
Worth saving?
Yes. And that you were, well, and still are, a very bright and talented young woman.
You're just like my mother, prejudiced.
Prejudiced? Me?
Yes, you.
All right. I do have to admit that I have some ulterior motives, like getting you to clear out and clean up the entrance of the building, like you're supposed to. And yes, there is the matter of your buying and using your own trash bin. But just because I am your downstairs neighbor does not mean that I am prejudiced. I know talent when I see it, and I don't want to see it destroyed.
You're very kind, Mr. Thomas.
I've been called many things, but kind isn't one of them. I'm just calling it as I see it. Don't call me Mr. Thomas. Please call me Trevor. I believe I deserve that after seeing your soul.
My soul?
Yes, your soul. It's all exposed in your book of poetry and your novel. And what's more, I even took care of your children. And I also partook of a piece of your tomato soup cake. I deserve to be regarded more than a Mr. Thomas. I am more than that.
Okay, Trevor.
That's better. Thank you. Now, what happened after they found you?
It was very embarrassing for me.
I'll bet it was.
When I was recovering, I discovered that I was in all of the newspapers. I was almost famous for trying to kill myself. The Boston Globe Morning Edition printed a front page story under the headline, "Beautiful Smith Girl Missing at Wellesley." And not to be undone, the Boston Herald named its story, "Top Ranking Student at Smith Missing from Wellesley." The Globe's Evening Edition published a front page article in which my mother was quoted. It sounds peculiar, but Sylvia has set standards for herself that are almost unattainable. She's made almost a minor obsession of fulfilling what she believes to be her responsibility to her sponsors, and I'm gravely concerned for her. Sylvia was constantly seeking ways in which to blame herself for the failure and became increasingly despondent. I ask you, who needs psychotherapy when your mothers will do it for you?
Good question. Usually one needs psychotherapy because of their mothers.
Well, that same morning, the Globe's front page was "Sleeping Pills Missing with Wellesley Girl." In a matter of days, I evolved from a beautiful Smith girl to a drug-infested Wellesley girl.
Anything to sell copy.
Well, after a stint at McLean Hospital, I finally found a doctor who cared for me and knew what she was doing. Have you heard of Dr. Ruth Barnhouse?
No, sorry.
Well, it wasn't my brother who saved my life. It was really Dr. Barnhouse. I returned to Smith to complete my degree with high honors.
Of course. I wouldn't have expected anything less. I'm curious about something. Did you learn anything about yourself from this incident?
I learned that the thing that I've always feared the most is failure. Fear of failing. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it does. Well, tell me about Mr. Hughes.
Ted? What about him?
Well, you haven't told me how your date was with him.
Why do you want to know? And why do you keep bringing him up? Don't you know how painful it is for me to talk about him?
Never mind. It's none of my business. If you don't want to talk about it, it's all right.
It's not all right. But if it makes you any happier, I'll tell you. I was 23 years old and a Fulbright scholar at Newman College in Cambridge. It was toward the end of February 1956 when I stepped into a room full of people and immediately spotted a big, dark, hunky boy. The potent combination of scotch and ginger wine had left me feeling like I could almost walk through the air. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, yes. Yes, many times. Some of them I remember. Others I don't, which is probably a good thing.
Well, apparently the alcohol had had the opposite effect on me. So I was told by my date afterward that I was so inebriated that I kept banging myself into trees as I walked to the party.
Ooh.
I've got to admit, I was in a bullish mood that night. One of the contributors to the St. Botolph's Review was a student named Daniel Hoods. Do you know him?
His name does not ring a bell.
Well, he had sneered at two of my poems that had appeared in another Cambridge literary magazine, dismissing my work as too polished and well-made. I felt so angry.
Oh, and you had a right to be.
Well, after all, I've only been writing for publication since the age of 8, and I've already earned a sizable sum of money for my poems and short stories from a bunch of U.S. magazines.
Yes. You've told me.
Well, so I walked up to Hughes, a pale, freckle-faced Peter House undergraduate, and said in an aggressive tone, but friendly, "Is this the better or worse half?"
What did he say?
Well, Hughes was stunned when he found out who I was and said that my words were fair retaliation for his facetious and wounding review of my work. So I saw out of the corner of my eye somebody approaching. It was the same hunky boy, the one who had been hunching around over a woman who I'd seen earlier. He introduced himself as Ted Hughes, and I recited the 3 poems he had published in the St. Botolph's Review to dazzle him with my vivacity. Thinking back, it's ironic that one of the poems I recited, Law in the Country of the Cats, are you familiar with it?
No, I don't believe so.
Well, It deals with the violent, irrational sense of enmity and rivalry that can often exist between individuals, even strangers. After I had recited some lines from his poem, The Casualty, Ted had shouted back over the music at me in a voice that made me think he might be Polish. You like? I did, very much. But he really wanted to know whether or not I wanted brandy. I yelled back yes, at which point he led me into another room. He slammed the door and started pouring me glassfuls of brandy, which I tried to drink, but I couldn't manage to find my mouth. Well, he told me he was working in London and earning 10 pounds a week. And suddenly he leaned toward me and kissed me, bang smash on the mouth. As he did so, he ripped the red hairband from my head and ravished me with such force that my silver earrings came unclipped from my ears. And then he moved to kiss my neck, groping me as he went down. And I bit him long and hard on his cheek.
Dear, you do make quite a strong impression.
When we emerged from the room, blood was pouring down his face. As I bit deep into his skin, I thought about the battle to the death which he had described in Law in the Country of the Cats and the perpetrator's admission of the crime. I did it. Ted carried the swelling ringmote of tooth marks on his face for the next month.
I've never understood the fascination of piercings and other body mutilations. I say, why inflict pain on yourself when there's so much around you?
Well, 2 days later, I composed the poem Pursuit in memory of that evening. There's a panther stalks me down. One day I'll have my death of him. Well, in March, I had a rendezvous to keep with Ted. He asked me to visit him in London at the Ruby Street flat. It was a grungy, run-down place that did not have adequate laboratory facilities. But that didn't matter. The attraction between us was even stronger than it had been during the St. Botolph's party. And we made passionate love all that night. The sex was so rough that my face was left battered with purple bruises and my neck raw and injured.
You give new meaning to the word passionate.
The only thing that truly upset me happened at 5 a.m. is that he called me Shirley, the name of his last girlfriend.
An affair to remember, right?
Well, I wrote to my mother and said that I had met the strongest man in the world and that he possessed a voice like the thunder of God. There were other things that I didn't tell her. I didn't tell her about his taste with the supernatural, or that he was dangerous at times when he was a breaker of things and people. Well, these would only concern my mother, and I didn't want her to worry.
Well, perhaps you should have.
Yes, maybe. But instead, I would rhapsodize about him, almost to the point of comic exaggeration. And for the next couple of months, I saw him. On weekends, I would act as his literary agent and type copies and carbons of his poems and submit them to American magazines using my contacts instead of writing or promoting my own poems.
It's amazing what one does for love.
By early May, even though we had hardly known each other for less than 8 weeks, Ted and I began to discuss marriage.
No, so soon?
Well, on June 13th, my mother came over to visit us, and we took her to supper at a German restaurant called Schmidt and told her of our decision.
I'll bet she was surprised by your news.
To say the least. And she thought it was too soon and that I didn't know him.
She was right, you didn't.
But when she finally met him, she understood my enthusiasm, for he was handsome and sensual, and he exuded a charm that even my mother found challenging to resist. We married on June 16th at St. George the Martyr. Our honeymoon was in Spain, 3 days in Madrid, and the rest in Benidorm, a small town on the Spanish coast. And, well, it was there when an incident occurred.
What incident?
It had been a beautiful day. We were just laying on the hillside when suddenly he was overtaken by an inexplicable rage. I don't know what brought it on. His face became white and his body contorted, his gaze intensified, and then suddenly he climbs on top of me, not kissing me as he usually did, but choking me. At first I fought him, and then eventually I merely gave in and allowed his superior strength to dominate me. His fingers tightened more and more around my neck, and at the moment when I resolved myself to death, he released his grip and stopped his assault as abruptly as he had started it.
Did you tell anybody about the assault?
No, I felt too ashamed, as if it was my fault.
Not even your mother.
Of course not. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction that she was right. I had gone too far to turn back. After Spain, I returned to Cambridge to complete my second-year studies. On the weekends, we got together and continued to write. Between my studies and writing, I would mail out our poetry. It resulted in very little cash, if and when it was accepted.
Was he working at all?
No. I started to worry about where the money was going to come from, and so I applied for and was offered a teaching position at Smith College beginning in September. I would teach 3 sections of freshman English each term for an annual salary of $4,200 a year.
And your husband? Was he able to find any work?
No.
I see.
Well, as soon as I completed my examinations, we packed up our belongings and traveled to America. From the start, I found teaching painful.
Why so?
Well, I felt inadequate for the task, overwhelmed by the material and intimidated by the girls. Also, I did not understand why my fellow faculty members, the same instructors who had encouraged me when I was a student, treated me so cold and distant.
Ah, yes, the world of academia, where tongues are sharper than swords.
Well, by October, I was nearing a state of panic. I would lay in my bed, unable to sleep, my nerves shaved to pain, and the groaning inner voice saying, "Oh, you can't teach, can't do anything, can't write, can't think." I wanted to be the perfect wife, teacher, writer at the same time. I simply wanted to live a life as it came. But as I struggled from day to day in a hell of class preparation, lecturing, and paper grading, I lost all drive to write. And as a result, emotional exhaustion and depression set in. I wrote in fits and starts and mailed out fewer of my manuscripts.
And your husband?
Well, during the same time, he wrote and published with a vengeance.
What did you expect? He wasn't working.
Yeah, and then he started to receive accolades for his work, and because of it, he was offered a position at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst to teach creative writing for the spring semester. And while he was basking in the glow of critical praise, I felt alienated by the faculty and was being buried alive by the expectations of my teaching position. I so much wanted to be away from the world of academia and ached to cook a pineapple upside down cake and write my own book of poems.
A book of poems I would understand, but a pineapple upside down cake?
Yes. You know, I hadn't made one for several years, so I decided to make one last week.
Oh no, you're kidding.
I believe there's still a piece left in the refrigerator. Would you like it?
No, I don't think so. Thank you. Your tomato soup cake was enough for me.
But that was last night.
Oh, I know. The memory lingers.
Fresh pineapples are impossible to find in London and very expensive. It costs much more than I can afford for my allowance I get from Ted. But then I turned to my blessed Irma and her book, The Joy of Cooking, and once again she saved me, for the recipe called for canned pineapples.
Thank God for ingenuity.
Well, I can't seem to see it. Well, someone must have hidden it.
It was meant to be.
Oh, no, here it is. Ooh, it looked better when I first made it.
Well, we've all seen better days.
I will say that when I first read this recipe, I was a bit daunted by it. It seemed difficult, with lots of bowls for this and that, more bowls than I thought I had, sifting here and there, folding of ingredients. But after careful reading, I thought I could do this, and I did.
Good for you.
Just follow the recipe step by step.
And pray for a miracle.
Okay. What were we discussing? Oh, yes, my tenure at Smith College. Well, apparently, other people didn't share in my poor opinion of my teaching abilities. I was told that the students generally enjoyed my classes and respected me as an instructor. Can you believe that?
Yes, I can.
And then, to my surprise, in late November, the English department voted unanimously to renew my contract for the second year.
Well, they would have been crazy not to.
But I decided to decline their offer.
But why?
Well, I had to leave Northampton for another reason. One that had less to do with teaching and more to do with Ted. For you see, there was gossip amongst the students and faculty about him and a couple of Smithies who made themselves available to him. My own students! We had been married for less than a year, and he was already flaunting his indiscretions in public.
Like a rabid dog.
When I finally confronted him with one of those incidents involving a student, he said they had only been taking an innocent walk around the lake. An innocent walk? What did he think I was, a fool?
Yes.
Well, the argument escalated into a physical fight, where I ended up with a sprained thumb, and he had raw fingernail marks on his face. I remembered him hitting me and seeing stars for the first time. blinding red and white stars exploding into the black void of snarls and biting. Oh, it was this thumb. Can you see it?
Let me see.
Well, it eventually healed, but there was a fracture to a marriage.
Oh, to say the least. And again, you didn't tell anyone about the incident.
I couldn't. Well, especially my mother. She worries far too much about me.
Well, someone has to.
Someone does.
Whom?
Dr. Barnhouse.
The doctor you saw in Boston.
Yes.
When did you connect with her again?
Well, after we concluded our teaching duties at Northampton and Amherst, we returned to Wellesley to celebrate our second anniversary with a supper prepared by my mother. At that time, she voiced her dissatisfaction over our decisions to quit our jobs to write full-time.
She was voicing her concern for you.
Why do you always defend her?
Well, as a parent, you should know why.
She reminded me that since my father's death, she had to scrimp and save to make ends meet, yet she somehow saw it that both of her children had the best education America and England could offer.
And
that she had supported her children by working for years in a job that she considered far beneath her talents. Well, she couldn't believe that we, who had acquired excellent and lucrative employment, had simply walked away from teaching positions that other young writers would have given anything to have.
well, that's what responsible people do.
No, for other people maybe, but not for me. I felt my mother's comments as both an attack and an attempt to control our lives. But all her guilt wasn't going to work this time, and I wasn't going to let her get to me.
What did you do?
Well, we found an affordable apartment to rent on Willow Street in Boston. In June, I sold 2 poems to the New Yorker for $338. After 10 years of rejections, I finally did it. I cracked the magazine, in whose pages I so wanted my work to appear. As I proudly pointed out to my mother, the amount was sufficient to cover 3 months' rent on our Boston apartment.
Ha! What did she say to that?
Nothing. God, a writer's life is loneliness.
I know.
Have you ever noticed that when at last you find someone to whom you feel you could pour out your soul, you stop in shock at the words you utter? They're so rusty, so ugly, so meaningless and feeble from being kept in that small, cramped dark inside you for so long?
Yes, I know the feeling. However, there is joy, fulfillment, and companionship there.
But the loneliness of the soul and its appalling self-consciousness is so horrible and overpowering.
Well, then why do you want to write then?
I guess it's because I have the urge to excel in one medium of expression of life. Oh, I can't be satisfied with merely living. Oh no, I must order my life in sonnets and stanzas and provide a reflector for my 60-watt lighted head.
Well, how was Mr. Hughes?
He continued to have success in selling his poems. In September, when we first moved to Boston, he earned upwards of $1,000. I had some success, but merely rejections. But by early October, I started to get worried that we had no money coming in. And when I brought up the subject about getting a job with him, he would leer or become angry and lash out at me.
Of course.
Honestly, what really upset me was my inability to become pregnant.
Really? Did you think it would solve everything?
Well, I thought so at the time. I thought it was something that I just desperately wanted and something that would bring him closer to me. I thought it would solve everything and that he would love me again. To make ends meet, I got a part-time secretary job at Massachusetts General Hospital's adult psychiatric clinic, the same facility where I was admitted after my breakdown in the summer of '53. It was like going home again. Well, Ted thought he was above getting a job. He took pleasure in humiliating me at parties and dinners, accusing me of refusing to sew buttons on his shirt and tearing up his old worn-out socks.
Well, did you ever confront him about this?
Yes, once. I asked him why he degraded me in front of our friends. Do you know what he said to me?
I can't wait.
Well, he told me that by scolding me, he hoped to force me to remain a domestic.
And you said nothing.
Right. He was aware of my love for him, but he wasn't always there for me. It's funny.
What is?
This is the same image I have about my father.
That's so.
Yes. Well, to help alleviate the depression and writer's block that I had been experiencing, I requested private sessions with Dr. Barnhouse. She forced me to examine the feelings that I had about Ted, my mother, and most important, my father. Dr. Barnhouse gave me permission to hate my mother.
But why?
For being a constant worrier. She's always agonizing.
About?
Everything.
Such as?
Well, the man that I marry, my finances, how Ted and I would support the children I wanted to have.
And those are the reasons to hate your mother.
It was my mother's worrying that made me angry, and it was the repressed anger that led to my depression. But how could I hate the person in my life to whom I have been closest and who cared for me? But I decided that I had to write, if only to defy my mother. And I started to write again, and my life started to look up. Some of my poems and short stories were being published. It was then that Ted announced that he wanted to move back to England. He was homesick.
What about your father?
Well, in the late winter, Dr. Barnhouse suggested that I do something that I've never done before. I had to visit my father's grave. So one day in March, I boarded a trolley bound for Winthrop. It's a small cemetery. I stared at the marker, and I just felt cheated. My first temptation was to dig him up to prove he existed and was dead.
Oh, you didn't.
No. Well, to deal with my anger and sorrow, I took a long walk around Winthrop's rocky shore. And as we were packing to move back to England, I had a medical examination confirming that I was pregnant.
Well.
In fact, 5 months along. Back in London, we found a functional, if tiny flat near Regent's Park and the Charing Cross tube station.
Lovely area.
Well, in early February, as I started to prepare for my birth of my child, I received a letter from a publisher, James Niche, about my first book, which was a collection of poems titled The Colossus. He said that he liked my poems and Heinemann wanted to publish them. I can't tell you how joyous I felt, and I couldn't wait to sign the contract.
What about Mr. Hughes?
Oh, Ted wasn't as thrilled. He was about to have another collection published in March. When his book was released, it received critical praise, and he won the Somerset Mom Award. At the end of March, my daughter Frida Rebecca was born. She weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces and measured 21 inches in length. She resembled my father, with the same blue eyes and shape of the face. Over the next year of our marriage, my first collection of poems was published. It took forever, and I finally started my novel, The Bell Jar. It was during that year that I suffered a miscarriage because of an incident.
Another one?
Yes.
Did you tell anyone?
Dr. Barnhouse. No need to tell my mother. I didn't want her to worry. She worries far too much about me as it is.
You've mentioned that.
Well, within a year, we moved to Devon, and I rebounded by giving birth to our second child. Our relationship continued to deteriorate. Motherhood exhausted me to the point where there were days, many days, when I didn't have the energy to write or create. And besides caring for my children, I was finding that domesticity stifling, especially when you discover that you're the only one in the relationship.
Yes, I can imagine.
As a result, I lost weight and spawned fevers and had periods of depression. Instead of supporting me, Ted accused me of being jealous of his growing fanfare of female students.
No, but who wouldn't be? You're no exception.
Yes, I do understand that sometimes depression fades into an abstraction, and that can be a problem. It didn't help our marriage. Whatever was left of it was being threatened by that intruder.
The other woman, Assia Weevil?
Yes. I banished Ted from the house and fell into a cathartic state of scribbling by writing my second book of poems, Ariel. My editor described the poems as a hot mess and full of venom.
Well, I'm not surprised. What was he expecting, Mother Goose?
I don't need anyone to validate me. I know I'm a good writer. In fact, I'm now writing the best poems of my life.
You get no argument from me.
I was back in Ireland for a few days before my decision to move back to London. I can vividly remember how as I tossed coins out of a window from the top of Yeats's tower into a stream below, I actually sensed the presence of Yeats's spirit.
I've had the same experience with Yeats's spirits, but usually after I've had a couple of glasses of Jameson.
It sounds strange, but it's true. He was there.
Of course he was. I don't doubt you.
One night in Devon, I flipped through my copy of Yeats's collected plays until I stopped at a particular line from The Unicorn from the Stars.
I'm familiar with the play. What line was it?
Let me think. Ah, yes. Get the wine and food to give you strength and courage, and I will get the house ready. It has given me strength and courage until last night.
When you met with him.
You wanted to know how the date went? It didn't.
Sorry.
Ted informed me that Asya is carrying his child and that he would never come back to me.
Oh, my poor dear.
Writing verses comes easy to him, and the critics love him because he's such a natural seducer, whereas I'm more of an introvert. There's nothing wrong with being that, is there?
No, of course not. I think every family should have one.
I'm so tired right now, and I want to sleep, but I can't.
Oh, of course you can. You need some rest.
I wish I could, but I can't. There's just too much to be done.
Yes. You've already told me. However, you do need your rest.
But I have so much to do. I have letters to write and post, and I have more cleaning to do.
They can all wait until tomorrow morning, can't they?
No, they can't, you see. I've decided to go away.
You have? But you told me earlier you weren't leaving for a holiday because of your children and your writing.
It's not a holiday.
Oh, but I'm confused. Oh, no. Oh, no, you can't. I won't let you.
Excuse me? Did you say something?
Yes. I haven't told you my story, my life.
No, but it's late and I have things to do before morning.
No, I insist. They can wait. We still have time. Now, I know all about you. I've read your poems, listened to your stories, but you don't know a thing about me.
You told me all about where you grew up, your education, your trips to the States.
Yes. There's more.
Can't this wait?
No, it cannot.
But
you must hear me out. There are similarities in our stories.
Similarities? Oh, I doubt that.
Well, to begin with, I rejoined the Leicester Museum in March 1940 after being found unfit for military service through deafness.
I have no trouble hearing what I want to hear.
And later that year, I was appointed the head of the museums and art gallery, initially with the title of curator, then promoted to director. After the start of the war, the New Walk Museum remained open. But with my appointment coinciding with the first daylight air raid on Leicester, many objects were moved to the relative safety of country houses away from the city. 1942, it was in order to requisition the whole building and clear it for wartime use. Many major museums and galleries remained closed for the duration of the war.
What do museums and galleries closing have to do with me?
It's about art and being able to celebrate it.
I still do not see the connection.
One needs art, whether it's visual or written or performance. The human soul cannot survive without it. So I decided I would reopen the empty building and quickly began organizing a program of talks and other educational and artistic activities for all ages. I also mounted exhibitions by local artists and arts and crafts groups and of touring exhibitions circulated by the Wartime Council for the encouragement of music and the arts.
It's all very heroic, but what does that have to do?
In July of 1946, my career in Leicester came to a sudden end after I was charged with a public indecency offense.
You? It's hard to believe.
Well, you see, back then, well, even now, homosexuality is classified as a serious criminal offense in Britain, and a court appearance for a gay offense, irrespective of the outcome, would signal almost inevitable dismissal from your job in most areas of life and public shunning by the community. At that period, Leicester was known as a relatively tolerant place where the police generally did not go out of their way to trap and arrest homosexuals. So it was somewhat surprising to me. Another man and I found ourselves arrested by a policeman in a public restroom. The policeman was concealed in the building.
I have never been arrested.
Irrelevant. The police witness report stated that there had been no physical contact or conversation between us. But the policeman considered that we, or the other man and myself, briefly, suspiciously looked at one another.
How ridiculous!
Don't laugh. Don't you ever laugh at me. It wasn't funny then. It isn't funny now. As this was potentially an indictable offense, the case was referred to the Court of Sessions. I was confident that no crime had actually taken place, but, well, I was advised to plead guilty by my barrister.
Guilty? But you didn't do anything.
But my barrister told me that a not guilty plea would open me up to cross-examination on oath about my sexual orientation and possible other allegations about my conduct and reputation. So I pled guilty. Following a strident denunciation from the bench, we, the other man and I, were remanded to prison for 4 days before being sentenced. On the return to court, several character testimonials were presented to the judge. Sir Kenneth Clark testified to my outstanding achievements and high professional standing. He added that it was widely expected that I would succeed him as director of the National Gallery. It was all in vain. The judge decided that despite the guilty pleas, the two men should be bound over to keep the peace for 12 months. To keep the peace? Although the verdict technically did not amount to a criminal conviction, I was still dismissed as director of the museums and art gallery and asked to vacate my flat.
Well, sorry for your misfortunes.
I lost everything!
Well, it may come as a disappointment, but I don't see any similarities between the two of us. I don't have a criminal record, certainly don't have anything to do with homosexuals. They repulse me.
Don't you see? We are both unicorns from the stars. Unusual, rare, unique. People don't know what to do with us, so they try to break our spirit or destroy us.
That's all very well, but I don't have time for this. I have things to do before tomorrow morning.
There's more to the story. Later, I found out I had been deliberately targeted. The former chief constable told a colleague of mine that the whole case had been regrettable and that he felt forced to act because of several repeated complaints from an undisclosed source that I was a known homosexual.
Really? You? That's hard to believe.
Yes. I had my share of critics, those members of the community who were less enthusiastic about the direction I was taking the museum. The local press had a field day. It carried lively letters against the museum, its policy, and me, as well as spirited letters of defense. And there were deputations and, of course, the anonymous letter. After leaving Leicester, I was appointed to the staff of the recently formed Arts Council that was chaired by Sir Kenneth. The same year, 1947, that I was pressured by my physician to cure my homosexuality. And so I made a disastrous decision to become normal. I got married. It's hard to believe the great length one goes, as well as the hurt one causes, to prove that oneself is normal. Less than 2 years and 2 sons later, we divorced.
Is there more to your story? I'm running out of time, and there's so much left to do.
I'll make it quick. I moved away to Paris to get away from England. The next 6 years, I traveled around the world promoting the latest approaches to education and the arts. Later in 1956, moved to America, New York, Buffalo.
Is that it, or is there more?
No, that's all.
Always loved a good redemption story, but my question to you is, what are you doing here? Living in a first-floor flat, working at what, a greeting card company? How come you're not teaching at some university or college?
I came back to be closer to my sons.
You were gone for the first 10 years or more of their lives. What's a couple more years?
Because they are my sons. My responsibility. Just like your children are to you. I made a mistake once of leaving them, and I'm paying for it now. I don't want you to make the same mistake.
It's been 22 years since my father left me.
I know.
For many of those years, I was convinced that my father committed suicide because he refused to receive medical attention. He could have lived, but instead he chose death.
I know.
Most of my life, I looked for a man who'd care for and love me like a father. Someone whom I could express my love for, but I wasn't able to. He denied me that right. At times I feel that he wants me to go with him, but...
No, don't. There is no reason to go. You have so much to live for. Your work, your children, they are a part of your life.
I feel so tired. I want to sleep, but I can't.
No, you've been carrying a lot of the past and its pain. It's time to let it all go.
But...
No. Lay down your head here and try to get some rest.
You won't think less of me, will you?
No, of course not. You've been judged enough.
You won't leave me, will you?
No. I'll be downstairs if you need me. Now lay down. Try to get some rest.
What about Ted?
Trust me, there will be others.
I don't think it's that easy. Once you give your heart to someone else, you simply can never retrieve it.
Never say never. You can. It just takes time.
I feel so cold.
Thomas takes the comforter and covers Plath.
Here. Now get some rest. Be downstairs if you need me. Get the wine and the food to give strength and courage. And I will get the house ready.